Are you ready? Welcome back to my channel, as they say. This is chapter 17, The Times. Thwop. Charles closed the heavy leather book with decision, but not without disappointment. The word mesmerism had not been in the dictionary, just as Ada had said. Mary was sure, but Charles thought there was no harm in checking. The two stood beside a long wood paneled counter in the gray walled basement beneath the Times office. Light came in from a series of horizontal windows set high on the wall near the ceiling, like glass envelopes onto the gray street. Tall wooden bookshelves stood in ranks that seemed to go on and on forever below the London streets. Each square shelf stacked with aging gray newspapers folded like blankets. Mary found the sight a little sad, as though each newspaper, one kept for each day going back over 40 years, were a book that would never again be read. She imagined they must be lonely. Mary had left the Marylebone house the previous afternoon with an assignment. As Ada had been overwhelmed by the outing to go to the prison and the curious encounter with the fishmonger, after which the entire house seemed to smell fishy, Mary alone would do what research she could regarding the mysterious word mesmerism. Ada would invent some excuse to Peeves for Mary's lateness. Mary had also left with her secret still ballooning inside her chest. Peeves had apparently decamped in a bit of a huff after Mr. Franklin released him from his second imprisonment in the distillery closet, and so Mary hadn't been able to talk to him about his being a spy. Her search for the word mesmerism was also a puzzle. The Times was an obvious choice, as the newspaper was in the business of knowing things, and knowing words in particular, but they were hardly going to allow a girl in by herself without an escort. Mary quickly realized it would be impossible. She had entered the morning coach desperately hoping that Charles would be officially not there, but actually there as usual, and he was. Charles? He replied, nose in a book as always. You know what you said earlier about a damsel in distress? He repeated. Mary wasn't sure what to make of that, so she pressed on. Well, I'm not certain, but I think perhaps I may be one. He put down his book immediately. She continued, There is something I must do, but I cannot think of a way to do it without your help. I'm a little distracted by my hair this morning. Oh, I can't find my place. Okay, I found it. She continued. There is something I must do, but I can't think of a way to do it without your help. There we go. No, said Charles, not a damsel in distress technically, he savored the word, but a friend in need as before. What am I to do? Relieved, Mary clarified. What we are doing together, hunting for a word, the meaning of a word, that Miss Ribbon says is not in the dictionary. Charles shrugged. Dr. Johnson's dictionary is quite old. Perhaps we're hunting for a new word? You have it exactly, exclaimed Mary. I knew you'd understand. Ada suggested we go to the Times and look there. A capital plan, miss, but they won't let you in alone, because I'm a girl. Yes, you know that's not entirely fair. You know that's not entirely fair. No, Charles acknowledged, which is why I was hoping you would escort me. But, Mary rushed on to say, I don't need you because you're just a boy. No, I need you because you know the Times and you love books, which means you know words. Mary paused. And I need you because you're my friend. Well, that settles it then, said Charles. The Times it is. The two rode all the way to Charles's boot polish factory, where Mary waited in the coach while Charles made excuses or arrangements to not be gluing labels on boot polish tins for the morning. After a brief word with the coachman, he turned around and headed to the impressive stony building that held the newspaper office. Being clandestine was almost effortless for Charles, and he spun a quick story for the clerk at the front desk about his being a messenger boy, and Mary, his sister, who could not be left alone. so of course she simply had to come with him, and would the clerk mind terribly pretending that she wasn't there? It was clear to Mary that Charles had rather a lot of practice at this sort of thing, and they had proceeded to a basement with its rows of stacks of old newspapers and its disappointing dictionary. Now what? Said Mary, when Charles had satisfied himself that Dr. Johnson's dictionary did indeed not have the word that they were looking for. Now that, said Charles, pointing to a row of identical thick books in gleaming brown leather below the counter. Encyclopedia Britannica, brand new edition, 20 volumes. He hopped his bottom onto the counter and swung his muddy boots over so as not to leave a mark. Hijklm, he muttered, and plucked the M book from among its fellows. He placed it carefully on the counter in front of Mary and opened it slowly. Smell that, he said. There was something magical about the smell of oiled leather and binding glue and fresh paper. Mary loved books, and all of hers had pages that had turned ivory with soft edges, like childhood blankets. But this book was new, perfect, like an undiscovered country. Charles flipped through its pages methodically. He frowned. No mesmerism, he said, disappointed. What's that? Mary asked, reading upside down. Mesmer, Franz, doctor. Maybe mesmerism is named after him, she suggested. Capital thinking, said Charles as he read the encyclopedia entry aloud. Unfortunately, there was no mention of mesmerism as far as they could tell. Dr. Mesmer was apparently a science who believed in something called animal magnetism and tried to treat patients with magnets or with buckets of water with magnets in them. This struck both Charles and Mary as odd and a little silly, but there was nothing more. He's dead, it says here. Mary had a sudden thought. When? When? Charles repeated. Yes, when did Dr. Mesmer die? He scanned the entry back up to the top. In 1815. When people die, said Mary, they write about them in the newspaper. It's called an obituary. Brilliant, exclaimed Charles, clearly excited with Mary's thinking. It'd be over there, he said, looking at the little cards with dates written on them, tacked along a bookcase. 1817, 1816, 1815. There we are. I'll start with December. You start with January, and we'll meet in the middle. And so began the dull bit, sitting on the uncomfortable floor in the not terribly well-lit basement, reading old newspapers in search of a mention of a dead doctor. From all the ink, Mary's thumbs were as black as the knocker on Newgate Prison before she reached the end of February. Time moved at a different pace here beneath the Times as they looked at the days in moments, months, and an hour. She had no idea how much real time had passed before she arrived in late March 1815 at a notice about the death of poor Dr. Mesmer. Here we go, said Mary, clearing her throat. Charles shot over to her end of the bookcase and sat on the floor beside her. Much the same as what we already know, Mary commented, except this bit at the end. Research into uncanny influence. What's uncanny influence? She wondered aloud. Uncanny means strange or mysterious, and influence means control or effect, said Charles. So uncanny influence means mysterious control or strange effect. Could that be what mesmerism means? She asked. The whole thing might be a coincidence. Mesmerism might have nothing to do with our dead doctor and his magnets. We're just guessing. So we have nothing, said Mary, frustrated. Well, we have almost nothing, but that's still something, said Charles, trying to cheer her up. She smiled at him in thanks. As they left the newspaper building, as gray as the paper itself, Mary looked at the blackened, inky thumbs. Almost nothing is something, she thought, and wondered what Ada would make of it all. Chapter 18. Dismissed. Inky thumbs did nothing to keep the squishy balloons in Mary's chest quiet. Peebs is a spy, it whispered to her ribs in an oily, rubbery voice. Oh, do shut up, she told the balloon silently. The first thing was to find Peebs and give him a chance to explain himself. She would help Ada accept whatever reasonable explanation Peebs could provide. Then she would tell Ada what little she had learned about the newspaper. It did not surprise Mary to find the house nearly silent when Mr. Franklin admitted her and took her cape. Ada was likely reading, and Peeves was likely writing or planning lessons. Nodding to the over-silent butler, she climbed the stairs to the library and found it empty of Ada. There was nothing in the drawing room. She knocked on Ada's door. Still nothing. Curious, but hardly extraordinary. She went back downstairs, where she found it very curious that Peeves emerged, visibly shaken from the parlor, envelope in his hand. The expression on Mr. Franklin's face was curiouser still. Something was wrong. Peeves began buttoning his coat at the bottom of the stairs, looking pale and sad. "Whatever's wrong, Peeves?" asked Mary. Ada was close at her heels, having come from the upstairs kitchen, bread and butter in hand. She hadn't seen the curious expression on Mr. Franklin's face, but it was clear to her that Mary was upset at Peeves's being upset. Ada was momentarily proud of herself for noticing such a thing, but her pride quickly vanished in the face of concern for her friend. "I'm afraid that I must take my leave of you." Peeves' voice was tight, and two bright red circles bloomed in his cheeks. "There has been a letter from the Baroness. I have been dismissed." He cleared his throat. "Effective immediately." Mary could scarcely breathe. She had no time to speak with Peeves privately about being a spy. She would be sent to school and never see Ada again. Her mind was spinning, and she knew the secret within her chest was going to explode at any second. "What letter?" "Let me see it," demanded Ada. Peeves dutifully handed her the note, folded 3 times and then in half, with a cracked wax seal in blood red, her mother's, and it read, "Mr. Snagsby, it has come to my attention that you have allowed the girls under your tutelage to operate a detective agency. You may not be aware of this, as Lady Ada can be particularly clandestine in her activities, but the situation is unacceptable nevertheless. You are dismissed from service immediately and are to send the Godwin girl off as well. Please tell Lady Ada that she is to remain in the house until my return from the country after Christmas. She shall not receive any further visits from Mr. Babbage. And this Wollstonecraft detective agency nonsense is at an end. Lady Anne Isabella Byron, Baroness Wentworth." "How could she possibly know?" asked Mary, bewildered. "Her spies are everywhere," shouted Ada, crumpling the paper and throwing it away. The word spies was too much for Mary, who shouted, "Peeves is a spy!" as loudly as she could. Ada went white as a sheet. Mary instantly regretted her outburst. No, not like that. He's not a spy for your mother. He's a spy for your father," she babbled. "I was going to tell you, but I wanted to give him a chance to explain himself first, and I never got the chance." Ada shook with rage. Peeves shot Mary a hurt glance. "It is true," he admitted. "My name is not Snagsby. It's Shelley." "You're Percy Shelley?" gasped Mary. Ada didn't know who that was. Peeves continued. "I was a friend of your father's, Ada. Before he died, he made me promise to keep an eye on you and serve as your tutor, allowing me the opportunity. I knew your mother would never countenance my being here if she knew my real identity. I apologize for misleading you." There was a long, strange, almost silence, like that of hissing of a fuse before a bomb exploded. It was Ada, breathing in as if she were sucking through a straw. A bomb, she knew, would have been quieter. "You knew?" she screamed at Mary. "Peeves was a spy and you knew? You kept a secret from me? I thought you were supposed to be my friend. Get out! All of you, get out! Get out!" And she stormed upstairs, shaking each and every step with an expert stomp, headed to no doubt all the way to the attic and the roof. "Oh, she is mad." But when she reached the top of the stairs, Mary quietly said, "Ada," in a way that made Ada turn and look down, furious and sad at once, tears welling in her eyes. Mary simply opened her hands wide, showing blackened thumbs. "Mesmerism, uncanny influence," was all she said, and she uttered it with a resigned desperation. Ada could make nothing of it, to be fair. Mary had to admit she couldn't either. Ada resumed, trembling with fury, and remounted her attack on the stairs, bound for her balloon. Peebs said nothing and could not look Mary in the eye as he left. Mr. Franklin gave Mary a slow, sympathetic look and handed her her cape, fastening it about her shoulders. Peebs had not closed the door behind him, and Mary looked out at the steps to Marylebone Road, spattered with rain, her heart suddenly porcelain. Mary took reluctant steps into an altogether different story, one without adventure, without clandestine names, without mystery, without uncanny influence, without her friend. The Wollstonecraft Detective Agency was finished. Oh, this is terribly distressing. What a way to end today's reading. Well, gotta hope for the best. All right. Goodbye, my lovely. I love you. Give your brother a hug and a kiss for me. Your whole family. Miss you. Love you. Bam.